On my 65th birthday, I heard my dill say, "I hope this is her last one." My name is Georgia, and at 65 I was actually looking forward to my birthday celebration. That is until I overheard something that pierced my heart like a dagger. My daughter-in-law Amanda whispered, "I hope this is her last one." I froze, smiled through my pain, and said nothing. But the very next day, I made a call that would change everything. If you're watching this right now, please like and subscribe, and let me know where you're tuning in from before I tell you how I finally stood up for myself after years of silent suffering. I've been a widow for 10 years now. My husband Thomas passed away after 40 years of marriage, leaving me with our only son, Harold. Before Harold met Amanda, we had the kind of relationship most mothers and sons dream of. He would visit me 3 times a week, call me every evening, and we'd spend holidays and special occasions together. I never felt lonely despite losing Thomas, because Harold filled that void with his love and attention. When Harold first introduced me to Amanda 7 years ago, I was thrilled. She was beautiful, intelligent, and seemed to make my son happier than I'd ever seen him. I remember how she brought me flowers on our first meeting and asked about my life story with genuine interest. She complimented my home, admired the photos of Thomas, and even asked for my apple pie recipe. I thought I had hit the jackpot with a daughter-in-law who wanted to be part of our family. Their wedding was a beautiful affair at a vineyard just outside town. I helped plan much of it, working alongside Amanda to create her dream day. I even contributed $20,000 toward the celebration, though they never asked. I wanted them to have everything perfect. During her toast, Amanda called me her second mother and promised we would always be close. I cried tears of joy, believing I had truly gained a daughter. When the young couple struggled to buy their first home in our expensive housing market, I offered to help. I gave them $60,000 for the down payment on a lovely 3-bedroom house just 15 minutes from my place. It was my pleasure to help them start their life together, and the proximity meant we could see each other often. 2 years into their marriage, my first grandchild Jacob was born. I was over the moon. I reorganized my work schedule at the accounting firm where I'd been employed for 30 years to help with childcare 2 days a week. I wanted Amanda to be able to keep her job at the marketing agency, and daycare is so expensive. When little Emma came along 2 years after Jacob, I was equally devoted to her. After decades of working, I finally retired at 62, just 3 years ago. I thought it would give me more time with my grandchildren, now 5 and 3 years old. I'd pick them up from preschool, take them to the park, and have them for overnight stays to give Harold and Amanda some alone time. The children became the center of my world, and I treasured every moment with them. Looking back now, I can see how things began to change subtly after my retirement. Amanda started canceling my days with the children, saying she had arranged play dates or activities. She would forget to tell me about Jacob's t-ball games or Emma's dance recitals until after they happened. "Oh, I thought I mentioned it," she would say with an apologetic smile that never reached her eyes. Still, I tried to build a good relationship with my daughter-in-law. I respected her boundaries, asked before buying gifts for the children, and always called before visiting. I brought meals when she was tired, offered to clean when their house was messy, and never criticized her parenting choices, even when I disagreed. I believed that with patience and love, we would grow closer over time. How wrong I was. The first major crack in our relationship happened during a family dinner at my house. I had prepared Amanda's favorite lasagna and bought special desserts for the children. When they arrived, Amanda immediately started complaining about the traffic and how inconvenient it was to drive across town. My home was only 15 minutes away from theirs. "Maybe next time we should meet at a restaurant halfway," she suggested, not even thanking me for the meal I had spent all day preparing. Harold looked uncomfortable but said nothing. After that, Amanda began declining my dinner invitations more frequently. "We're just so busy," she would say, or "the kids have early bedtimes now." Sometimes Harold would come alone, but those visits grew less frequent too. When they did visit, Amanda would check her watch constantly, rushing everyone through the meal as if my company was something to be endured rather than enjoyed. Harold used to call me every day. That dwindled to once a week, then to occasional texts. When I called him, he often whispered into the phone as if he didn't want Amanda to know we were talking. "Can I call you back later, Mom?" became his common response, but those return calls rarely came. It became clear that Amanda was controlling Harold's schedule and their family activities. Holiday plans were now dictated by Amanda's preferences, with my traditions pushed aside. My Christmas Eve dinner, which had been a family tradition for decades, was replaced by a celebration at Amanda's parents' home 2 hours away. Once I overheard Amanda complaining to Harold in their kitchen. "Your mother is always hovering. She thinks she knows better than everyone how to raise our children. I can't breathe with her constant interference." I was shocked. I had been consciously trying not to interfere, always asking before making suggestions about the children. The few times I had offered advice were when Jacob had that terrible rash that needed medical attention, or when Emma was struggling with separation anxiety at preschool situations where my experience might have been helpful. The gifts I bought for the grandchildren became another source of tension. The educational toys I purchased were too complicated. The books were not age-appropriate. The clothes were not their style. Eventually, I started giving them cash to buy what they wanted, but even that was met with comments about teaching the children better financial values. When I suggested that Jacob might benefit from reading practice over the summer, Amanda dismissed my concerns. "The school knows what they're doing. He's fine." 6 months later, his teacher recommended extra help with reading, exactly what I had gently suggested. I noticed I was no longer consulted on family decisions, even those that affected me. Plans would be made, and I'd be informed after the fact. "We've decided to take the kids to Disney for Thanksgiving. You'll have to celebrate on your own this year," or "We've enrolled Jacob in weekend soccer so we won't be available for Sunday dinners anymore." In response to these changes, I tried to adjust my behavior to please Amanda. I stopped offering unsolicited advice, reduced my visits, asked permission before buying anything for the children. I walked on eggshells, careful not to say or do anything that might upset the delicate balance. But no matter how I changed, it was never enough. The tension between us remained unspoken, but grew increasingly evident. Harold seemed trapped between his love for his mother and his desire to keep peace in his marriage. When Amanda made snippy comments or excluded me, he would look pained, but remained silent. His lack of defense hurt almost as much as Amanda's behavior. "Mom, you know how Amanda gets," he would say privately, as if her treatment of me was something I should accept as normal. "Just try not to take it personally." But how could I not take it personally when I was being systematically pushed out of my sons' and grandchildren's lives? As my 65th birthday approached, I found myself unusually excited. Milestone birthdays had always been special in our family, and despite the growing distance, I hoped this occasion might bring us closer together. Harold had promised a small family celebration at my house, and I clung to that promise like a lifeline. I bought a new dress, a lovely blue one that brought out my eyes. I had my hair styled at the salon for the first time in months and even splurged on a professional manicure. Looking in the mirror, I felt pretty and hopeful. Perhaps this birthday would mark a turning point in our relationship. I couldn't help remembering previous birthdays before Harold married. For my 60th, he had organized a surprise party with all my friends. For my 55th, he took me to see a Broadway show in New York, a weekend trip, just the two of us. Even smaller birthdays had always been acknowledged with thoughtfulness and love. Despite it being my birthday, I prepared small gifts for Jacob and Emma. For Jacob, I found a model dinosaur kit he had mentioned wanting. For Emma, a plush unicorn and a picture book about a brave princess. I wrapped them carefully, hoping to see their little faces light up. 3 days before my birthday, Harold called. "Mom, there's been a change of plans," he said, his voice tight. "Amanda's not feeling well. She's been really stressed at work and she needs to rest this weekend." "Oh," I said, trying to hide my disappointment. "Is she okay?" "Just tired. We might stop by briefly on your actual birthday, but we can't do the dinner we planned." I suggested an alternative. "What if I come to your house instead? I could bring food so Amanda doesn't have to cook or clean up." There was a long pause. "That's not going to work, Mom. Amanda really needs space right now." After hanging up, I sat in silence for a long time. Then I called my friend Martha, who immediately insisted on taking me out to dinner with a few other friends on my birthday. "We won't let you spend it alone," she declared firmly. The dinner with my friends was lovely. They brought cards and gifts, and the restaurant even provided a complimentary dessert with a candle. Martha raised her glass in a toast. To Georgia, who deserves all the love and respect in the world, never forget your worth. Just as we were finishing dessert, I received a text from Harold. We'll stop by your place around 8 tonight. Kids want to give you something. I rushed home quickly, tidying up and putting out the cake I had bought, still hoping for a small celebration with my family. I arranged the gifts for the children on the coffee table and waited, my heart pounding with anticipation. At 8:30, much later than promised, the doorbell finally rang. Harold stood there with Jacob and Emma, who immediately ran to hug me. Amanda lingered in the doorway, her expression a mask of polite disinterest. "Happy birthday, Grandma!" the children chorused, handing me a homemade card with colorful scribbles and stickers. Harold gave me a quick hug and presented a small gift bag. Inside was a scented candle, the kind you might buy at the last minute from a grocery store checkout line. "It's lavender," he said, as if that made it special. "Thank you," I said, genuinely touched by the children's enthusiasm, if not by the thoughtless gift. "Come in, I've got cake." Amanda stepped inside, reluctantly checking her phone. "We can only stay for 30 minutes, she announced. "The kids have school tomorrow and they need their sleep." I tried not to let my disappointment show as I ushered everyone into the living room. "I understand. I'm just happy you could come at all." I served cake on my best china plates, the ones that had belonged to my mother. Jacob and Emma dug in eagerly, while Amanda declined a piece, citing her new diet. Harold took a small slice but barely touched it. After blowing out my candle and making a silent wish for family healing, I gave the children their presents. Their excited thanks was the highlight of my evening. Amanda's tight smile as they opened the gifts spoke volumes about what would happen to those toys once they got home. While the children played with their new treasures in the living room, I went to the kitchen to make coffee. As I approached the doorway with the coffee pot, I overheard Amanda speaking to Harold in low, intense tones. "I hope this is her last one," she said coldly. "I cannot stand these family gatherings anymore. Your mother is always trying to buy the children's affection with expensive gifts, undermining our parenting. I'm tired of pretending for your sake." I froze the coffee pot, trembling in my hand. I expected, hoped, prayed to hear my son defend me. Instead, there was only silence, followed by Harold's soft, placating voice. "Let's just get through tonight. We'll talk about this at home." The pain that surged through me was physical, like a heart attack. 65 years of life, 40 years of marriage, 30 years of motherhood, and this was what it had come to, being tolerated, resented, wished dead. I set down the coffee pot and took 3 deep breaths. Then I plastered a smile on my face and walked into the room as if I hadn't heard a thing. "Who wants coffee?" I asked brightly. Amanda checked her watch again. "Actually, we should get going. Kids, pack up your things." "But we just got here," Emma protested. "Grandma understands," Amanda said firmly. "Don't you, Georgia?" I knelt down to hug my grandchildren, holding them a little tighter than usual. "Of course I do. Thank you so much for making my birthday special." Harold gave me another quick hug at the door. "Happy birthday, Mom," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. Did he suspect I had overheard? Was there shame in his avoidance? As their car pulled away, I stood in the doorway waving until they turned the corner. Then I went inside, cleared away the barely touched cake and coffee cups, and sat alone in my living room, surrounded by torn gift wrap and birthday cards from friends. The words echoed in my mind. "I hope this is her last one." Not just a thoughtless comment, but a wish for my death, my erasure. And my son's silence, his complicity cut even deeper than Amanda's cruelty. That night was the longest of my life. Sleep eluded me completely as I tossed and turned, replaying the evening's events and Amanda's terrible words over and over in my mind. Around 2 a.m, I gave up on sleep entirely and sat in my armchair by the window, staring out at the empty street. I pulled out the old family albums from the bookshelf, turning the pages slowly. There was Harold as a baby, Thomas and I gazing at him with wonder. Harold taking his first steps, starting kindergarten, graduating high school. Thomas teaching him to ride a bike, to drive a car, to tie a tie. So many memories, so much love poured into raising this child. There were more recent photos, too. Harold's college graduation, his wedding to Amanda, the birth of Jacob, then Emma. In each successive picture, I noticed how my place in the family photos moved from center to periphery until in the most recent Christmas photo, I was standing awkwardly at the edge, looking like an afterthought. I found myself thinking about Thomas, wondering what he would say if he could see how things had turned out. He had always been my advocate, my partner, my strength. In our marriage, we had faced every challenge together. Since losing him, I had felt adrift, clinging to Harold and his family as my anchor. Perhaps that had been my mistake. Tears flowed freely as the night deepened. I cried for the relationship I had lost with my son, for the grandchildren who would grow up barely knowing me, for the lonely years stretching ahead. I cried for my own naivety, believing that love and sacrifice would be met with gratitude and respect. As dawn broke, I remembered something Martha had said to me months ago when I first confided in her about the growing tension with Amanda. "Georgia," she had said, "you've spent your whole life taking care of others. Maybe it's time to take care of yourself for a change." At the time, I had dismissed her words as impossible. My identity was wrapped up in being a wife, a mother, a grandmother. What else was there? But now, sitting in the pink light of sunrise, I began to see the wisdom in her advice. I had spent 65 years putting others first. I had set aside my dreams of traveling to support Thomas's career. I had abandoned my plan to get a master's degree to focus on raising Harold. I had spent my retirement savings helping Harold and Amanda buy their house. I had restructured my retirement around childcare for my grandchildren. And what had it gotten me? A daughter-in-law who wished for my death. A son who wouldn't stand up for me. A future of increasing isolation and disrespect. As this realization dawned, something shifted inside me. The sadness began to transform into something else: anger. Not a destructive rage, but a clarifying fire that burned away the fog of hurt and confusion. I was angry at Amanda for her cruelty, at Harold for his weakness, but most of all at myself for allowing this situation to develop and continue. I had one life already well into its third act. Did I want to spend my remaining years begging for scraps of attention and affection from people who didn't value me? Did I want my grandchildren to witness their grandmother being disrespected and marginalized? What example would that set for them about how to treat their elders, about the value of older women in society? No, I would not be a victim anymore. I would not be wished away, pushed aside, or tolerated. I would reclaim my voice, my power, and my life. I grabbed a notebook and began to write furiously. Not just a letter to Harold expressing my hurt, though I did write that too. I wrote a plan for myself, a declaration of independence, a manifesto for my third act. By the time the sun had fully risen, I had filled 20 pages with my thoughts, feelings, and most importantly, my intentions. I would never send the letter to Harold I wrote that night, but the act of writing it was cathartic, a necessary step toward my liberation. As birds began to sing outside my window, I felt a strange sense of peace and purpose. The pain was still there, but it was no longer overwhelming. It had become fuel for the journey ahead. When the clock struck 8, a reasonable hour to make phone calls, I picked up my phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in months, my younger sister Susan, who lived in California. We had always been close, though the distance made regular visits difficult. She answered on the second ring. "Georgia, what a lovely surprise. Happy belated birthday. I sent you a card. Did you get it?" "Yes, thank you," I said, my voice still rough from crying and lack of sleep. "Susan, something happened yesterday that I need to talk about." I poured out the whole story: the canceled dinner, the last-minute visit, and most painfully the words I had overheard. Susan listened without interrupting, occasionally making sounds of dismay or support. "Oh, Georgia," she said when I finished. "I'm so sorry. That's absolutely heartbreaking. What an awful thing for her to say, and for Harold to just stand there. I've never liked that woman, but this is beyond the pale." "I don't know what to do," I admitted. "I can't pretend I didn't hear it, but confronting them might mean losing access to the grandchildren completely." There was a brief silence before Susan spoke again, her voice suddenly animated. "Come to California." "What?" "Come live near me. My community has lovely condos for sale, many with views of the ocean. You've always said you wanted to try living somewhere warmer. Start fresh, Georgia. Build a new life where you're valued and respected." The suggestion was so unexpected, so radical, that at first I couldn't process it. Leave my home, move thousands of miles away, start over at 65. Yet even as these doubts surfaced, another part of me thrilled at the possibility. California, ocean views, no more cold winters, my beloved sister nearby, new people who would know me as Georgia, not just as Harold's mother or Jacob and Emma's grandmother. I'll think about it. I promised, though, in truth, the seed had already been planted and was beginning to grow. After talking with Susan, I felt energized. I made more calls, each one a step toward reclaiming my agency. First, I called my attorney to discuss updating my will. The house and the majority of my savings had been earmarked for Harold and the grandchildren. Now I wanted to explore other options, creating educational trusts for Jacob and Emma that would bypass their parents' control, and donating a significant portion to charities supporting women's education and elderly care. Next, I called the community college and registered for an art class I had been eyeing for years. Thomas had always gently discouraged my artistic pursuits, calling them impractical. Harold had inherited his father's pragmatic view. "Mom, at your age, why start something new?" he had asked when I mentioned the class before. Their voices had kept me from signing up. No more. My third call was to a real estate agent to discuss listing my house. The market was strong and my mortgage had been paid off years ago. The proceeds from the sale would give me the freedom to relocate and establish myself somewhere new. Then I called a travel agent and booked something I had dreamed of for decades, a month-long trip to Europe, visiting all the art museums and historical sites I had only seen in books. The trip would depart in 3 weeks, giving me time to make necessary arrangements. I went to the bank and reorganized my accounts, removing Harold as a secondary signatory. I withdrew the money I had been saving for his family's summer vacation surprise, $20,000, that would now fund my fresh start. Throughout the day, I also called old friends I had neglected while focusing on Harold's family. Many were delighted to hear from me and eager to reconnect. We made plans for lunches, movies, a book club revival. I realized how much I had narrowed my social circle, putting all my emotional eggs in the basket of my son's family. By evening, I felt lighter than I had in years. There was pain still, yes, but also a growing excitement. For the first time in decades, I was making choices solely based on what I wanted, what would bring me joy and fulfillment. My phone rang several times that day with Harold's number displayed on the screen. Each time I let it go to voicemail. I wasn't ready to speak to him yet. Not until I had solidified my plans, strengthened my resolve. Instead, I sent him a brief text. "I need some time and space for myself right now. I'll reach out when I'm ready to talk. Please respect this boundary." Then I turned off my phone-ordered pizza delivery for dinner and allowed myself the luxury of eating in front of the television, watching a romantic comedy, and laughing out loud in my empty house. Small rebellions, perhaps, but they felt significant. That night, I slept deeply for the first time in months. 6 months have passed since that painful birthday. I'm sitting on the balcony of my new condo in Santa Barbara, watching the sunset over the Pacific Ocean. The air is warm, scented with salt and flowers. A glass of good white wine sits on the table beside me. I'm wearing a flowing caftan in bright turquoise, a color I never wore in my previous life, thinking it too bold for a woman my age. My sister Susan lives 10 minutes away, and we see each other several times a week. Through her, I've made new friends, mostly vibrant women in their 60s and 70s, who hike, swim, take classes, travel, and refuse to be invisible or diminished by age. I've discovered a passion and talent for watercolor painting. My art teacher says I have a natural eye for color and composition. 3 of my paintings were selected for the community art show last month. One even sold for $300. Not a fortune, but the validation was priceless. My health has improved dramatically. The chronic headaches and digestive issues that plagued me back home have vanished. My doctor says they were likely stress-related. I walk on the beach every morning, practice yoga twice a week, and have lost 15 pounds without really trying. Harold called countless times after I left. His voicemails evolved from confused, "Mom, where are you? We stopped by and your neighbor said you were traveling," to concerned, "Mom, please call me back, I'm worried about you," to angry, "This is ridiculous, Mom, you can't just disappear like this," to pleading, "Please, Mom, whatever I did, I'm sorry, just talk to me." I responded only with brief texts, assuring him I was safe and well, but needed space. After I settled in California, I sent him my new address, but asked him not to visit without invitation. Of course he flew out anyway, showing up at my door unannounced 3 months ago. Seeing him standing there looking lost and confused nearly broke my resolve. But I had done my work in therapy by then, another new addition to my life, and maintained my boundaries. "You can come in," I told him, "but only if you're ready to really listen." We sat on my balcony, the same spot where I'm sitting now, and I finally told him everything. How I had overheard Amanda's cruel words. How his silence had hurt me even more than her wish for my death. How years of small slights and exclusions had gradually worn away my sense of worth and belonging in their family. Harold cried something I hadn't seen him do since he was a teenager. He apologized profusely, admitting he had been weak and cowardly, too afraid of conflict with Amanda to stand up for me or even for himself. "I've been a terrible son," he said, his voice breaking. "I don't know if you can ever forgive me." I reached across the table and took his hand. "I already have," I told him. "But forgiveness doesn't mean going back to how things were. I've changed Harold. My life has changed, and our relationship needs to change too." I explained that I had revised my will. The house had been sold, and while I had created trust funds for Jacob and Emma's education, the bulk of my estate would now go to charities supporting causes I believed in. Harold seemed shocked but didn't argue. I told him about my trip to Europe, how I had stood before the actual paintings I had only seen in art books, how I had sat in sidewalk cafes in Paris and made friends with fellow travelers, how I had felt truly alive and independent for perhaps the first time in my life. "You seem different, Mom," he said, studying my face. "You look younger somehow, happier." "I am," I said simply. "I'm finally living for myself, not just as an extension or support for someone else's life. It took me 65 years to learn that lesson, but I'm grateful I finally did." We established new parameters for our relationship. I would visit them twice a year to see the grandchildren staying in a hotel rather than their guest room. Harold would come to California occasionally, sometimes with the children if Amanda agreed. We would talk on the phone every Sunday, just the two of us. I made it clear that while I had forgiven Amanda, I had no interest in pretending we had a close relationship. "I'll be civil and kind when we interact for the sake of the family," I said, "but I won't subject myself to her contempt or hostility anymore." To my surprise, when I finally did visit 6 weeks ago, Amanda was noticeably different toward me. Not warm exactly, but respectful. Perhaps she had gained appreciation for all I used to do now that she no longer had my free childcare and financial support. Or perhaps she simply respected the new, stronger boundaries I had established. Either way, it was a livable detente. More importantly, Harold seems to have found his voice in his marriage. He told me he had started therapy himself, working on his conflict avoidance and people-pleasing tendencies. He stood up to Amanda when she initially objected to the children visiting me in California. "They need their grandmother in their lives," he had insisted, "and we need to make that happen." Jacob and Emma were delighted by my house near the ocean and begged to come back for summer vacation. We built sandcastles, collected shells, and I taught them to paint simple watercolors. Emma declared she wants to be an artist like me when she grows up, a comment that brought unexpected tears to my eyes. There have been other developments in my life, too. 4 months ago, I met William at a community dance class. He's a retired architect widowed 3 years ago with a dry sense of humor and kind eyes. Our friendship evolved slowly into something more. At 65, I never expected to feel the flutter of new romance again, yet here I am, my heart light as a teenager's when he calls. Last week was my 66th birthday. Susan organized a party at her house inviting all my new friends. William brought roses and took me to dinner at a restaurant overlooking the harbor. Harold called early in the morning to sing Happy Birthday with Jacob and Emma, who had made me cards they proudly displayed on video chat. As I blew out the candles on the beautiful cake Susan had ordered, I made no wish this year. I didn't need to. Everything I might have wished for, I had created for myself. Looking back on that painful birthday a year ago, I can now see it as a gift in disguise. Without hearing those hurtful words, I might have continued in my diminished role, gradually fading into insignificance in my own life. The pain broke something open in me, letting in light and possibilities I had never imagined. I've learned that it's never too late to set boundaries, to demand respect, to rebuild your life on your own terms. I've learned that family love shouldn't come at the cost of your dignity or self-worth. Most importantly, I've learned that the person whose approval and love I most needed was my own. So if you're watching this and feeling unappreciated, invisible, or taken for granted, please know that you deserve better. It's never too late to choose yourself. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family? How did you find the courage to put yourself first? Please share your experiences in the comments below, like this video, and subscribe to hear more stories of women reclaiming their power. Thank you for listening to my story. Remember, sometimes the most painful moments can lead to the most beautiful transformations if we're brave enough to make the change.